Years have passed, yet the mystery surrounding the disappearance of Brandon Swenson, a 19-year-old college student from Marshall, Minnesota, remains unsolved. It was on May 14, 2008, when this enigmatic case began to unfold. After completing his high school education on his college journey at Minnesota West Community and Technical College, the fateful incident occurred on the heels of the academic year, precisely on the evening of May 13. Brandon had attended an end-of-semester gathering in Lynde, a locale approximately 7 miles southwest of his hometown of Marshall. Sometime after midnight, he bid farewell to his friends and began his journey homeward. The route from Canby, where he was that night, to Marshall was a well-trodden path for Brandon. He traversed this 30-mile stretch almost daily. The area was sparsely populated, and the trip typically took about 35 minutes. However, as fate would have it, Brandon's journey home took a distressing turn. He found himself in a predicament when his Chevy Lumina veered off the road, becoming stuck in a small ditch. Despite his determined efforts to free the car by pushing it, he was met with frustration. His calls for help to friends went unanswered, leading him to dial his parents' number at 1:54 in the morning. Brandon reassured his concerned parents, Brian and Anita Swenson, that neither he nor the car had suffered any harm. He simply needed assistance in getting the car back on the road and into the driveway. Upon receiving their son's call, Brian and Anita wasted no time in heading towards Brandon's presumed location. Brandon had confidently described himself as being halfway between Lynde and Marshall, a mere 10 minutes away from their residence. Convinced of his certainty, his parents embarked on their journey. However, as they approached the spot Brandon had indicated, they were met with confusion and concern. Their son and his car were nowhere to be seen. Brian and Anita dialed Brandon's cell phone, instructing him to watch out for their arrival. After a few minutes of searching, they flashed the headlights of their pickup truck in hopes of making themselves visible to Brandon. To their surprise, Brandon claimed he couldn't hear their horn or see any lights on the road. Perplexed, they asked him if he was certain about his location, to which he confidently affirmed that he was indeed in the right spot. The parents implored Brandon to flash his headlights, desperately scanning the inky darkness in search of any telltale glow in the distance. However, their efforts were in vain, as nothing emerged from the obscurity. The phone line remained connected throughout this confusing search, but Brandon's patience was wearing thin. He was increasingly irritated, convinced that he had accurately conveyed his location to his parents, unable to fathom why they couldn't find him. Eventually, exasperated, Brandon abruptly terminated the call. Initially, Brandon had opted to stay near his stranded car, but he became convinced that his parents had gone astray and would never locate him. Growing weary of waiting, he decided he could reach what he believed was the nearby town of Lynde on foot. In the distance, he spotted what he presumed to be the town's lights, and thus he informed his parents of his intention to head there. Brandon instructed them to meet him in the parking lot outside a bar. Brian consented, dropping Anita off at home before driving to Lynde. During his journey on foot, Brandon kept up a dialogue with his father over the phone, providing updates on his progress. He mentioned walking down a gravel road and later taking a shortcut through a field. At one point, he reported hearing the sound of water nearby, although the darkness obscured any visual confirmation. Undeterred, he pressed onward toward the distant lights, which he believed were the lights of Lynde. Then suddenly, shortly after 2:30 a.m., Brian heard Brandon exclaim, "Oh shit," through the phone, and the call abruptly ended. Alarmed, Brian frantically attempted to reconnect with his son, but was met with frustration as all calls went directly to Brandon's voicemail. It seemed either Brandon's phone had succumbed to a drained battery or some unforeseen issue had momentarily disrupted its service. Brian felt lost and helpless, repeatedly traversing the same stretch of road without any sign of Brandon or his vehicle. Annette and Brian enlisted the help of Brandon's friends, embarking on an all-night search, scouring the area for any trace of Brandon's car. After hours of exhaustive searching, they were convinced they had combed every possible location. Returning to Lynde, they even scrutinized the bar parking lot just in case Brandon had somehow managed to reach it, but it remained dark and empty. By 6:30 a.m., panic set in, and the parents were certain something had befallen their son. In their desperation, they contacted the Lynde police to report Brandon missing. However, the police did not share the parents' sense of urgency, considering Brandon an adult with the right to disappear if he wished. Anita tried to explain that something had transpired moments before Brandon's phone had gone silent. Despite combing the town, the The police were unable to locate Brandon and Lynn. A subsequent search of the roads leading into town yielded no clues. Turning to Brandon's cell phone records, investigators made a startling discovery. Brandon's calls to his parents had originated not in Lynd, but near Taunton, another small town along State Highway 68. Taunton lay on the main road to Canby, northwest of Marshall, and was situated 25 miles from Lynd. The search for Brandon shifted to the Taunton area, and it didn't take long for investigators to find his car. It had come to rest in a ditch off a gravel road just over the Lincoln County line, approximately a mile north of Highway 68. An exhaustive search of the car's interior yielded no evidence of injury. Remarkably, Brandon's description of the events during his call to his parents had been accurate. The only discrepancy was his mistaken location. The vicinity surrounding the car lacked discernible footprints to indicate the direction Brandon had walked. Further examination of his cell phone records revealed that his call to his parents had been routed through a cell tower near Minnesota, another small town on Highway 68, located approximately 4 miles southeast of Taunton. An extensive search operation was initiated, guided by information gleaned from Brandon's cell phone records. Helicopters scoured the area from above, while search dogs were deployed on the ground. The canines quickly picked up Brandon's scent, tracing his path for nearly 3 miles. They determined that Brandon had headed westward across fields, ultimately arriving at an abandoned farm. Continuing their pursuit, the dogs followed the trail alongside a river, but their tracking abruptly ceased at a specific point near the water's edge. It appeared that Brandon had entered the river at this juncture. The water ranged from knee-deep to approximately 15 feet, and even if he had ventured into the river, it did not necessarily mean he had met a watery fate. There remained the possibility that he had managed to make it to the opposite bank. A comprehensive survey of the 2-mile stretch along the river was carried out. If Brandon had drowned, his body should have been carried downstream. Yet no trace was found. The local sheriff diligently combed the riverbank for a period of 30 days, but his efforts were fruitless. Investigators began to doubt that Brandon had drowned in this area, as his body would have likely been discovered promptly. Official search efforts ceased after a week, but Brandon's family refused to give up hope and continued their independent search. On May 24 and June 7, approximately 100 volunteers joined Brandon's parents in combing areas south and east of Porter. Some utilized ATVs to cover more ground, while others traversed the terrain on foot or horseback. Despite their unwavering dedication, they discovered no clues regarding Brandon's whereabouts. The search resumed during the autumn season as fields in the vicinity were cleared. Cadaver dogs were enlisted to assist, yet they too failed to yield any results. When winter arrived, marked by blizzards and freezing temperatures, the search was once again halted. At this point, a staggering 122 square miles had been scoured, but Brandon remained elusive. Numerous theories emerged in an attempt to explain Brandon's inexplicable disappearance. Some speculated that he might have orchestrated his own vanishing act, but this appeared improbable. Brandon was excelling in his studies, having recently completed a course in wind energy. He harbored no issues at home or at school, eagerly anticipating a transfer to an Iowa-based institution to further his education. He had no legal troubles and maintained a close bond with his family. Another theory posited that Brandon had been struck by a vehicle while walking, with the driver panicking and concealing the body. However, this theory was cast into doubt by Brandon's account to his father, stating that he was walking through a field, not on the road. This assertion was corroborated by both cell phone records and the tracking path of the search dogs, which indicated that Brandon was not on the road. Furthermore, if such an accident had occurred, evidence would likely have been left at the scene. The area where Brandon went missing was sparsely populated, with only 135 residents in Taunton at the time and a mere 175 in Porter. Much of the landscape was dominated by farmland, with houses few and far between. It's plausible, if not highly likely, that Brandon's disappearance was a tragic accident. He ventured into the dark fields and rural roads with no streetlights to guide him and no readily distinguishable landmarks. Corn and soybean fields stretched endlessly in the dark, all appearing indistinguishable. Brandon had mentioned hearing the sounds of water, possibly slipping into the river at some point. However, this didn't necessarily spell doom. He could have extricated himself from the water, disoriented but alive. He might have continued walking for a while before succumbing to the harsh elements, likely perishing due to hypothermia. While Minnesota boasts a population of wild animals, including bears and large wild cats, an attack by any of these creatures would have left behind evidence. Additionally, had an animal attack occurred, Brandon's personal belongings such as his keys, phone, glasses, scraps of clothing, and traces of blood would have remained, which was not the case. What happened to Brandon Swenson remains a mystery to this day, and his case has become one of the most famous and mysterious cases in disappearances.